Hey everybody. Our blogs are looking great for this week. I see that you guys are responding pretty unanimously with some surprise about the environmental impacts of our kind of modern American death rituals. That was in that student compare and contrast essay. It is surprising to see how much just natural, how much natural resources are used between the wood, the metal, the fuel, the stone, and all this just to dispose of our loved ones' bodies, right? And I think we're all kind of surprised and a little horrified by the information regarding like all the toxic chemicals that we put in the body. Those don't stay in the body forever, right? Those concrete vaults don't keep us from, all of our goo rotting out into the water supply. And then, of course, that goes into the groundwater, comes back to us through our wells and rivers and drinking water. So it's important to look at those very toxic chemicals that we're burying in our ground inside the bodies of our loved ones. Like the process essay video I had posted, it is very empowering to know how things happen, the process of how things are made. Many of you were very surprised by the process of gelatin. So now, if that was one of your favorite foods, you can be upset that, well, now the light has been turned on and I have to decide to participate in this process or stop eating my favorite gummy bears, right? Knowledge and empowerment and responsibility can be frustrating. It can be inconvenient. So now that we know this about our death practices, are we going to learn more about it? Are we going to encourage green burials? Are we going to choose to not be embalmed ourselves, etc.? And it's interesting to me that I remember in 5th grade learning all about Egyptian mummification, and we don't learn about what we're doing in our own families, with our own bodies, in our own graveyards. But we learn about the ancient Egyptians, right? So it's strange that this process is such a mystery. Even, if you're in the process of planning somebody's funeral, you may still not know what is fully entailed with the different aspects of this. One interesting thing that I would usually talk with you all about if we were in person is there was this British writer named Jessica Mitford, and she wrote this book in 1960 or 61, I think, and it was called The American Way of Death. Well, she researched the funeral industry and its practices, and I really recommend reading this. You can find aspects of or snippets of it online, and well, the general public was so shocked by what Mitford taught them about the funeral industry, especially the things about embalming. And if you don't know what is fully entailed in the process of embalming, I recommend you learn, because it is a very upsetting thing, and if it's something that we're going to do to ourselves or to our loved ones, I think it's good for us to know what that process is. So everybody was so shocked by Mitford's book about the funeral industry that Congress actually called a series of hearings to investigate the funeral industry, and they passed the funeral rule. And this is a 50-year-old law that still dictates things today. So the funeral rule says that there are no federal or state regulations that say we have to embalm across the board. So there may be some cases, like if you're going to transport the body through an airplane or across state lines, that there may be requirements for embalming. But as far as our standard funerals, it's not required. So the funeral rule says that your funeral home director cannot say that it's required by state or federal law. The funeral home itself can say, if you want Tri-Cities Funeral Home, we require embalming. The state of Kentucky doesn't, but we do. So they have the right to say that they require it themselves, but it's not required by law. Another thing the funeral rule says is that you can bring your own casket. So you can build your own coffin. If you go to walmart.com and search for casket, if you search coffin right now, you're just going to get Halloween decorations, but search for casket and you can buy actual coffins on walmart.com. So, and of course, they're a lot cheaper. So if you bring your own coffin to the funeral home has to use it and they're not allowed to charge you an extra fee. So there's all these different rules that came about from these congressional hearings. It's legal in all but I think 6 states to care for your own dead. You may have to get paperwork to transport the body. You can't bury the body within 250 feet of a power line or a water source, things like that. But we can actually care for our own dead if that's something that's important to us. It's important, I think it's very important to understand what our options are so that we can have that conversation with the people in our lives. And you don't want to have that conversation once somebody gets a scary diagnosis, right? To be like, oh, well, okay, now that you have cancer, Mom, what do you want done with your dead body? It's important to have these conversations now when people are healthy. You can find all sorts of funeral planning kits online, and I really recommend that you do those. And you have that kind of conversation. And you can try for it to be light and playful. My sister's husband died suddenly, and I watched her have to plan this funeral without knowing what he wanted because they were young. They hadn't thought about it. They hadn't had that conversation. And I watched her really struggle while she's in the throes of this grief, trying to say, well, what should I bury him in and what songs should I play and where do I bury him and does he want to be cremated? And so what I did a couple Christmases after that was I got everybody in the family funeral planning kits and we all got together and had snacks and made a silly day of it. But it was important to know because now when it happens, we know what everybody wants. So I really recommend that. Some other things, the Extra Credit blog, only a couple people chose to do that, where you did some research on some other rituals and wrote about those in your blog. I definitely, like I said in the video about the death rituals, I think that they're interesting because they tell us a lot about the culture that we're in. But to tell us also the options that we have, that's a good thing to look at. I'll post some links maybe under this video of things that I've found that are interesting, like you can be buried as a tree pot, like in a tree pod or in a mushroom suit where you grow mushrooms, or the life gem, they can take your ashes, your cremains, and make you into a diamond ring. I think that would be awesome, right? Would you wear mamaw like as a set of earrings? You'd be like, oh, they're so beautiful. And they'd be like, oh, they're your mamaws? No, they are mamaw. I think that would be interesting. Anyway, I look forward as we continue into this process. For the blog next week, we're going to be talking about the Dia de los Muertos, and the week after, we're going to be talking about Indonesia's, the Toraja peoples. And so we're going to take some longer in-depth looks into some of these practices that are unlike ours here in America. And I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say about all those.